Hi, this is Lupe Prado. I am a career and life coach, and you're listening to Paid Vocation. In this podcast, I'll be sharing real stories of people who are doing work they love to help you find work that you love, whether that's a new role at your current company, switching careers completely, or starting a business. And if you're already doing work that you love, this podcast will be a place that you can come back to feel supported and uplifted. Thank you so much for listening. Monica, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Of course. Thank you for the invitation.
So I like to start every interview by asking guests, as a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I was one of those weird kids that actually knew I wanted to be a lawyer since the time I was a kid. I remember back in middle school, it's when I first identified that I wanted to be a lawyer because I always loved reading and lawyers always did great things in the book.
I think you're the first person who's been on the podcast. Well, maybe I've had a couple of journalists who knew they liked writing, but I think you're one of the few who knew and actually did that.
Yeah. Did I know what a lawyer did every day? I don't think I understood that, as a seventh grader. But definitely the older I got, the more I went to school, I was like, I really do want to do this.
Mm-hmm. So tell us about the work you do today and what kind of lawyer and what does being a lawyer entail?
I mean, the great thing I think about being a lawyer is that you can do whatever you want with your degree. So when you're in law school, you basically just learn how to think, how to write, research like a lawyer. You're not really taught the law. And so it's really when you get your first job is when you start really learning the intricacies. In my situation, I knew that I wanted to do immigration law probably by my third year of law school, which is the final year. And it was very much a process of elimination type of process. I tried all kinds of other laws. I interned with law firms, with judges. I worked at a big firm all through undergrad. When I finally realized these are all the things I don't want to do, I also reflected back on my own personal roots and realized that as a daughter of immigrants, that immigration law would be a great vehicle to be able to help others who are trying to manage this complex area of law. And unfortunately, there was a lot of bad immigration attorneys, right? I knew from my parents' own personal experience how it's so easy to be preyed upon when you are an uneducated population, very vulnerable, and then just scared of the government. I decided to do immigration law, and I now have been doing that for about 17 years.
Wow. Well, I want to back up a little, Monica, and talk about your background. So your family, what your experience was like growing up, because I think you have such a special story and your family story, and that led you kind of alluded to it just now, your roots and how that would give you a vehicle to help people. So tell us a little bit about your background, and because I assume that has had a big impact in how you show up today as an attorney, as a leader, as a mom, all the things.
Definitely. So I am the daughter of immigrants from Mexico, and my parents first immigrated here. Well, my dad immigrated in the 70s. My mom joined him in about 1980, along with my three older sisters. And so my sisters were actually born in Mexico. And so for about the first 8 years of my life, what I remember, the bits and pieces I remember was living like an undocumented person, even though I was born in the United States and always had all the rights. I remember my parents having this fear of the police, a fear of government. And then when I was 8, I believe I was 8 already, is when they got their green card and was the first time that they were able to leave the country, because that was honestly for them, that was the most important reason to get legal status, was so that they could visit their family back home in Mexico. And so for me, I remember the bits and pieces I remember from my first 8 years of life was hearing these stories about how my dad had lost thousands of dollars to this immigration attorney who promised him a work visa, which at the time was not possible for somebody at his education level. And then through the passage of the amnesty law and through the help of a nonprofit, Catholic Charities, him, my mom, and my three sisters were all able to get legal status.
Wow. So obviously there's a big connection to what you do today and your own parent stories.
Yeah, because when I look at my clients, I think part of the reason why I've been successful is because I can connect with them. And it's not like we're on the same level. Because I think sometimes people get intimidated going to lawyers and they feel like, oh, they don't understand me, they don't speak my language, or they're going to look down on me because I entered illegally or I worked illegally. And I mean, I can definitely connect and relate to all of my clients.
Well, and that's how my parents gained their residency was through the amnesty program in the 80s. So it was probably through that same program that your
Yeah.
parents
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and now that I think about it, I don't know who helped them through that process. I wonder if it was Catholic Charities too.
Yeah, I mean, at the time, Catholic Charities was also another nonprofit that a lot of people used, Casita Maria. But
Oh yeah.
yeah, I
Yep.
mean,
Yep.
is it Casita Maria? Yeah, they
Yeah.
they
I
were based
remember
in
that.
Oak Cliff. So yeah, there you go. There's
It
your own
probably was
immigration
a
story.
yeah. So, one of the things I know about you, Monica, is that your sisters have played a big role in your life. And do you mind sharing a little bit of that and how they played a key role in your journey too and your success?
Definitely. My oldest sister is 8 years older than me. Like I mentioned before, she was born in Mexico. She came to the US when she was 7 years old. And as the oldest of five children, she was also like forced to grow up very quickly, mature very quickly. And so she was more of like a second mom to me.
Mm,
We didn't really like grow up together in the house for many years because she married young. But when I was in junior high, she was the one who found out about Hockaday
mm,
and helped both me and my other sister navigate the admissions process and helped us go there on a full academic scholarship because at the time my parents they're blue collar workers, no more than a second grade education, so they were just trying to like get us to graduate high school, and what they knew about was like, hey, let's take them to a local public school.
So, some of the listeners aren't local. So, if you mind sharing what
Oh, yes,
Hockaday is.
sorry. Yes. So Hockaday is an all-girls school, pre-K through 12 here in the city of Dallas. It's consistently ranked like one of the top schools in the state of Texas. And because of that, also comes with the hefty private school price tag. And so it's very prestigious, and being admitted is an accomplishment in itself. And then obviously qualifying for financial aid is also, the other significant burden that people normally have to overcome to be able to
Sure.
attend this school.
Yeah. So, your sister attended Hockaday
So
and
yes,
then she helped you figure out Hockaday as well.
so I have two older sisters, and my oldest sister, Dominga, did not go to Hockaday. She went to our local public school, and she, through a classmate of hers who was a former Hockaday student, found out about it. And because she knew me and my other sister, Nancy, were always in the most gifted classes and pre honors and all that, she knew that obviously we would be challenged. Not only would we be challenged more, but that we would have more opportunities if we went to the school that was, on the other side of town and would receive a higher quality education. And also because I grew up in a neighborhood that at the time was very infiltrated with like people who sold drugs, with people who
Mm,
were in gangs. It would also get us out of our community so we
mm,
could have exposure to just a bigger network of people.
mm. And how did that change your life, do you think, Monica?
Oh, I think that's one of the big turning points in my life because at the age of 14, because I think I started hockey as a 14-year-old, I saw just a whole other side of life besides like the physical commute of going from South part, East part of Dallas, East Dallas, all the way to North Dallas, and just like seeing the abundance of
Mm,
things, seeing the way people lived on the other side, to also just opening my mind and my brain to all the doors that were open for me. My junior year in high school, I was given the opportunity to study in France with a family there,
oh, I
something that I
didn't
would
know
have
that.
never, yeah,
That's so cool.
something I would have never like had the opportunity to do if I had gone to my local public school. And that was also with a full tuition scholarship. Yeah,
And that
like
was over the
traveling,
summer or for a
that was
semester?
my whole junior year of high school.
And you lived in
Um,
France for the whole year?
Yeah, yeah. So
Oh
it's
my
a
God.
program through a prep school in Andover. So if you've heard of Phillips Academy or Exeter,
Oh,
they're
I've heard of
boarding
Phillips
schools.
Exeter. Yep. Hmm.
Yeah, so they're boarding schools on the East Coast. It's through them where they basically take a group of 60 students and they take them to different countries. I went to France, but I think they also have like a Spain and China program, maybe another country. And they place you with a French family, but you go to an American high school together. So you're not completely by yourself, right? You have your support system of other American students and your principal teachers and all that, but you are immersed in the culture, and which is the best way to learn a language. And then also for me, the language was the first benefit, but the secondary benefit was just the cultural exposure to Europe. Because as Americans, we tend to be like, we think America is the center of everything. And we don't understand how other countries live, how other governments function. And I was living there in 1998. I went from 97 to 98. And it was during the Clinton impeachment trial. And it was just like seeing how the French saw
Hmm.
our American process. Yeah, it was very enlightening. And it was something that experiencing at such a young age just brought me so much perspective in everything that I do.
Hmm. Well, I'm curious. Okay, so your sister learned about Hockaday and encouraged you to apply. You learned about this program in France, and I assume had to do something to get in and then actually go there. What's coming up for me is like that took a lot of courage, a lot of curiosity. I'm sure you had all your friends who were all going to the same school and then friends that were going to stay at Hockaday. What do you think drove you to follow that through, to go to Hockaday, to go to France? Was there a part of you that was a little scared, a little intimidated? I don't know. I can imagine there must have been a lot of feelings there.
Yeah, no, for sure. Going to Hockaday, I don't think was that hard of a decision because my older sister was already there. And so I was familiar with the school. And when I started the school, I started with the friend. So just the academics were hard to adjust at first. But going to France, I tell myself because when I tell people that story, especially like people who are Hispanic, they'll ask, like, wow, your mom let you go. And it goes to
Yeah,
like,
that is interesting that your mom
that's the
let you
second
go.
question, right? I think my personal naivete at the time, and also my mom's, because my mom had no idea where France was. She thought, oh, it's another country. It's like Mexico, right? It's like, I can drive there in 10 hours. She had no idea. It was
Wow.
like an ocean away, how many thousands of
Wow.
miles until she decided to send me a care package. And she had a big old box she wanted to mail me. And my sisters were like, you know how much money that's going to cost, right? And when she found out how much the postage cost to mail this care package, she was like, well, how far away is she?
Oh
There.
my God. Oh my God.
I think had she known how far it was, she would have never let me go. I mean, the
Wow.
first time I literally got on a plane was when I went to France. I had never even been on a plane before. And for me personally, again, like I'm a reader. So I had always read all these great stories about Europe. I had studied French. I had to study 2 years of French because, I was like, I already know Spanish. Why am I going to take Spanish? I thought I knew so much. I was like, oh, I'm going to go in there. I'm going to be fine. And little did I know that I didn't know as much French as I did. And then also how homesick I would get because I had
Mm.
also had never been away from home for that long of a period of time. So it goes a lot to like just being naive and not like really knowing. But sometimes that's good, right? Because then there's no fear because you don't know that there's anything to be scared of.
Mm. Hmm. Well, even thinking about my own kids and like thinking about my daughter going away for a year, her junior year in high school, that
You're
like
like,
terrifies
no,
me. No, you can't go.
no. I mean, I'm a big proponent of it for my own personal daughter. I have three girls. I want to encourage something similar for them. I don't know if it would be a whole school year. It might just be a semester, which that's something that is available through their school. But obviously, like I'm also in a different position than my parents were, right? I remember several of my classmates had their parents come for the holidays and
Mm.
came to visit them and did their own trips. And my parents couldn't afford to do that. I do think it's a valuable experience for you to experience, especially at the young age of 16. I was 16 at the time, because it's just so easy to travel around Europe on your own. And for me, like it really did teach me just how to be independent. I have friends, even my age, who don't like traveling by themselves. And I'm like, I did it since I was 16 years old. It's not a big deal. But of course, it's that exposure that helps.
Mm. Hmm. Well, one of the things I admire about you, Monica, is this you're very confident. You're a leader. You're super involved in the community. So you're not only an attorney and a mom to three girls, but you also serve on boards, you volunteer, you know everyone. And when I think of you, I think about kind of that all girls education at Hockaday and how that must have shaped you. What else do you think helped you to kind of be the person you are today? Because I see you as this like person who's just so driven to have an impact, a positive impact, and who deeply cares and a baddie.
Well, thank you, Lupe, for all those nice words. I think it's a combination of different things, right? Obviously, one of it's like my lived experiences, my
Yep.
education, but a big part of it is also my upbringing,
Yeah.
right? I mentioned my parents. And so, like, my dad, he was a migrant worker. So he would travel back and forth from Mexico to the US for
Mm.
about 10 years. And
Wow.
my mom was all by herself in Mexico for the first 10 years of their marriage, raising my three sisters. And she was the oldest of 13 kids. So she was a caretaker her whole life, right? Because her mom, pretty much as soon as she was old enough to like work and do duties, she was doing that. When she became a mom of her three daughters before I was born in Mexico, she made the decision of like, there's got to be more for my girls than
Mm,
this
mm,
life. And so she was the one who took it on herself to say, I'm leaving, and I'm going to join you. And she had to talk
mm.
to my dad that because my dad was he was used to traveling back and forth. And back then it was a lot easier to travel back and forth in and out of the country. And she was the one who took the initiative
Oh,
and said,
interesting.
I'm coming here,
Mm,
which, what I think about it now, and this was in the 80s, and especially in the Mexican culture with the machismo, what kind of courage did it take for her to make that decision, right?
mm,
And my whole life, I have seen this like super strong woman just dominate, and so
mm,
I don't think I had any choice, right? Because it was just like, you are who you see. And so
mm,
I always saw her as very independent, very strong, even though, like, my parents are still married and my dad has always been the primary breadwinner. As long as she could, she worked. It just instilled this great work ethic of not
mm,
only like do you show up and work, but you also give back,
mm,
right? And so she's a very Catholic woman. So it's always like giving up her time. Anytime new people came from their hometown in Mexico to the US, I always remember like, hey, they were like staying in our couch for a day or two before they found their first job. She was always helping people. I mean, obviously, she passed that on to us. She still does. I still get the calls of like, hey, so and so needs help. You need to help them. And it's not even like I can say no. It's like, okay, like, who am I helping now? So it's just like, yeah, I think my upbringing just has a lot to do with it too.
Mm. Wow, and I could hear your emotion coming through as you're talking about your mom.
Yeah.
I didn't know that side of you, Monica.
Well, now you're
And
seeing a
now
whole
and
new part, right?
that's beautiful. So like you were raised by a strong mom.
Yeah.
Who-
And I mean, also part of the reason why people ask about my sisters and like, how are they so great? It's because of our mom, because you have to have a strong role model. And even though she's not educated, she like did everything else right. I think we are all the same. We all know that even though we've been blessed and we've had a lot of opportunities, that we do have this obligation to give back.
I agree completely. I always find it fascinating to learn about almost like the family tree, right? Who do you think influenced your mom to be the way who she is? Her mom or her dad? 'Cause sometimes it's the dad who taught their daughters differently. Who do you think modeled for your mom or helped shape your mom into who she is?
That's a really good question. I think with my grandparents, I mean, it's probably a mixture of both, right? What I know about her relationship with my grandmother, because again, I didn't grow up with my grandmother. My grandmother
Sure.
lived in Mexico most of her life. So I would just see her when she visited or we visited her. But my grandmother was also a very strong woman. I mean, she had 13 children. She worked
Mm,
all her whole life. She passed away the day before my daughter Maddie was born,
mm,
probably around the age of like 80. Yeah, she was very hard worker and she was also very tough on my mom. Mom always talked about how her dad was so close and sweet to her, right? It's funny because she got like the sweetness and all the affection from her dad. And I mean, I think she probably had
mm,
a closer relationship with her dad, but it was partly because her mom was so tough on her,
mm,
made her grow up at a very
mm,
young age. She's told me like at the age of 6 or 7, she was already like working the fields with her younger brother, planting corn or doing all this stuff. But it's also because as a woman, especially in the Mexican culture, like you have to be raised to be strong, right? Because she was the oldest. So, she had to help raise her brothers and sisters pretty much. Her mom, I think, was the one who instilled this great work ethic in her because you kind of had to do that to survive at that time.
mm. And as you think about your journey now and the work you do today, there's so many kind of pieces to what you do. And you've talked about kind of like the value you bring through the work you do and then the
Mhm.
giving back. I see you and I think of someone who really enjoys what she does. You're not doing it just to get a paycheck or just to check the box. You're doing things because you really believe in them. So if someone's like listening and thinking like, I hear Monica's passion, maybe they didn't have someone they could model after, or maybe they're feeling unmotivated by their own work. What would you say to those people listening?
Yeah, and then that's a story. The thing I like to tell young lawyers specifically, right? Because like I mentioned earlier, sometimes people just think really badly about lawyers, right? Because what do you see on TV? What do you see when you're walking down the road? You see all these ads for like ambulance chasers, people who do personal injury law, or people who are just trying to bill their clients all this money. And they think that that's all lawyers are. They're just people who want to take people's money and people who lie for a living. And for me, I got to where I am again by process of elimination, right? Because again, I was like, oh, a lawyer, they can use the law to like make a difference and help people. And then I saw the reality of it, right? So for me, it was very much trial and error. When I was an undergrad at SMU, I was like pre law. So I got to know about job opportunities. And so I took a job as a file clerk at one of the big law firms downtown, one of the big law firms that's like 300 lawyers. And I worked there all through college part time. And I remember how many young lawyers I met who hated their job, who
Mm,
basically were like, don't go to law school, don't waste your money and your time. You're going to end up with all this debt and you're
mm,
going to hate it because all we do is like research and they never see clients. They never even get to court because only like the high level attorneys get to do that. They're just doing all the grunt work and they're working crazy hours and have like hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt from law school. And I remember seeing how miserable they were. And I thought to myself, well, I'm not going to do that. Like, I'm not
mm,
going to do your area of law because clearly, like, you don't like it. And then when I was in law school, I was out in Lubbock at Tech. So it's this very small town, very small legal community. So I went to go work for like a solo practitioner, which is a lawyer who does like basically anything that walks in the door.
mm,
So her bread and butter was like family law cases or divorce cases, criminal law cases, and then a little bit of personal injury. And so she had me like work on all those cases with her. And I realized like, yeah, I don't want to do this either. Like, this is not me. Like, these people are just arguing. Nobody's happy. You know, in divorce
mm,
cases, both sides are not happy. They're never going to be happy. And same thing in personal injury because people think like they deserve all this money. They don't get it. So then they're going to be unhappy with you. And I'm like, I want to do something that I know I'm going to make a difference in somebody's life and I'm going to see the benefits, right? Like, it's not going to take me like 10 years to finish a case, right? And that's what I found in immigration, especially, you know, I started doing immigration law, doing deportation defense, which
mm,
is going to immigration court and basically defending somebody from being deported from the United States. And the rush that you get when you know that not only does your client get to stay in the United States, but they get to get out of immigration jail and they get to be reunited with your family. That was just like the best feeling in the world for me. And
mm,
so it's just so rewarding. And then even somebody becoming a citizen, right? So somebody who's maybe been a resident their whole life and never thought they could become a citizen, and you help them and you go with them to the interview and you see the emotion. I mean, you can't pay for that. It's
yeah.
just the best feeling. And so for me, it was finding something that gave me joy. And so that's what I tell lawyers where it's like, you don't like this area of law, don't just give up on the profession, find
Mm,
another area of law. And then the other thing with a law degree is that you don't have to be a lawyer. Going to law school is just about becoming a critical thinker. You see lawyers who are CEOs of companies, COOs, who are just doing policy work, running for office, running for Congress, running for president, because law school just teaches you how to be a critical thinker. And so for me, I always just say, like, do what makes you happy. And if it doesn't make you happy, then don't do it.
it's simple and yet it can be, it's like a simple idea. And I know for a lot of people, we can get in our own head about it. Was there ever a part of you, because from what you just shared, it sounds like you were able to kind of figure out what you didn't want to do. And then you found this thing that brought you joy and you pursued it. Was there ever a part that said, oh, I should pursue this quote unquote glamorous, like corporate law, big law kind of thing that people hear about that has all this like, I don't know if the right word is cachet or that has a lot of like
More
prestige.
prestige. Right,
Right.
right, right.
And then that like people are like, oh, that's the thing to do when you're an attorney or a lawyer or whatever. Did you ever have that pressure of feeling like that's what you quote should do?
I think thankfully for me, I didn't feel that pressure. One, because again, like my parents were just happy that I was going to law school. Like
Yeah.
they were never like, oh, you gotta like go on, make out like six figures and all this money straight off the bat. So there was no expectation of me, right? It was all on me.
Mm,
I had to be very self-motivated and disciplined. But also I did get exposure to that because I worked at one of the most prestigious law firms in Dallas as a college kid. And
Mm,
normally, the way it works when you're in law school is if you want to work at one of these big corporate law firms, which that's what my firm was a big corporate law firm. What you do is you interview in the second year of law school to get a placement with that firm that following summer, the summer between your second year and your third year. And then if that goes well, then they offer you a job post grad. Well, I had been working for one of the partners since I was a freshman in college. I totally bypassed that. And he was just like, hey, you want to come work for me after your 1L year, after my first year? Which I was like, of course I do. Like, it's a great experience. So I spent like the first half of my summer taking summer law classes in Guanajuato, Mexico. And I spent the second half of my summer working for him. And he would give me the same assignments that he was giving like his second year law student. And I remember all my classmates were like, wow, how did you get that? And it was like because I worked for him for 4 years in college. And if I had really wanted to pursue it, I know he would have helped me. And again, it goes back to naivete because I know now the people who did get those corporate law jobs were prepped on what to say during the interview and what not to say. And I never was because I've always been a very authentic person. And I'm not going to say, oh, yes, I want a corporate law job doing real estate law just because that would get me the job. I was honest. And I think I told him, I was like, well, I think I really want to do international law, even though I didn't really understand that. And he was just like, yeah, we don't really have that at this firm. I was like, yeah, that's fine. I'll figure it out. But yeah, no, I mean, obviously, I know how much those attorneys got paid straight off the bat. And yeah, that definitely would have been a very nice salary. But I also saw that money doesn't bring you happiness, right? Because I saw all these lawyers who literally were miserable and they literally, not one, not two, whenever I would tell them, hey, I'm studying for the LSAT, which is, the prep course for law school, they all tried to dissuade me
mm,
from pursuing the law. So it was just like,
mm,
yeah, I'm not doing this.
mm. Yeah, what I keep thinking about is how you model, like you figured out what it is that you didn't want, and then you carved your own path and built your own successful firm. And you haven't talked about this, but tell us a little bit about the firm and the growth you've experienced and like all the things, because you've carved your own thing. You could have done that should path, right? Followed the I should do this corporate law thing if you'd felt this pressure to do it. And you didn't. You carved your own path and you found lots of success.
Yeah. So as you can see behind me,
For those listening who aren't watching the YouTube video, she has Lira Bravo Law sign behind her because she's at her office.
yeah, so my law firm's name is Lira Bravo Law. I started it in 2011. So I'm in my 13th year of practice. And initially, when I started the firm, I did it mostly because my old boss told me to do it.
Oh,
Because I've always,
interesting.
yeah, which is, yeah, a very unique story too. Because normally, like your
Which
boss,
boss?
the one that I worked for in Longview. So
Okay.
before I started my firm, I worked for three different immigration law firms, all small practices, no more than like three lawyers. And so the last job that I had was out in East Texas, about 2 hours from Dallas. It was also like a general practice. I was basically running the immigration law department for this attorney. His name's Jose Sanchez in Longview, Texas. And so after being out there almost a year, he basically told me, like, hey, one, that he was going to grad school. He's going back to grad school at Harvard for some master's. He couldn't afford me anymore. But two, he was like, you're ready. You're ready to go off on your own.
Mm,
Part of the reason I had taken that job was because he had told me I eventually am going to open a Dallas office and I would like for you to run it, but
mm,
first come out to Longview and help me out here. And then by that point, his life changed tracks, right? He decided to go to grad school. So Dallas office was no longer in the works. And he was the one who encouraged me and said, you can do this. And I've always been very risk adverse. My parents have always been very conservative with money. I've always been told, like, don't take out debt. So I would have never done it had he not pushed me to do it. Not only pushed me to do it, but also like guided me on how
mm,
to do it, right? Because I didn't graduate with a business degree. I should have. I started out pre-business, but then I changed tracks. I just had no idea how to start a business. And he basically, told me the basic steps. But the biggest thing that he helped me with was he let me take clients with me, which is
oh,
kind of
well.
unheard of. Normally, when you like leave a firm to start your own practice, you fight over the work, right? Because the
Mm,
old firm doesn't want you to take some of their clients. But because the immigration court is based in Dallas and he didn't know how to do immigration court work, that's what I did. He let me take all the immigration court cases with me, which at the time was like about 10 clients, but that was enough to get me started. And then from there, it kind of just snowballed. First, it was just very organic growth.
in the first year. And then by year two, and I mean, I was very lean, it was just me and one part-time worker. And then in year two is when I actually started spending money on marketing. And it coincided with a law change. In 2012, President Obama announced the DACA program, which is the work permits for people who enter under the age of 16 as kids. And so I had this great opportunity where basically my marketing was all ready to go before they even announced the new
Mm.
law. And so from there, I went from like having one employee to having four employees over a month. And then now, 13 years later, I have four attorneys who work for me and about 20 support staff.
Wow, that's amazing. And your own office build and your own office in an office building. I went to the 13-year celebration, which is really cool to see your space. As we close our session today, what do you want to say to someone listening who's thinking about maybe pursuing their own path? So crafting their own path, maybe not in law, but just in general.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think part of what has helped me be successful is just trying different things, not being scared of failure. I always like to share the story that when I first applied to law school, I didn't get in. I didn't get in anywhere. I applied my senior year of college and I wasn't
Mm.
successful because at one, I didn't apply to a lot of schools. I was very picky about where I applied to. I didn't let that stop me from being a lawyer, right? You're thinking about going to business school or if you're thinking about your whole life, you think this is what I'm going to do. And somebody tells you no, they reject you. Don't take no as an answer. That's one lesson I learned. It's like, you know what? I didn't get in anywhere. And I had to like go back and tell all my family and my friends, like, hey, I'm not going to law school next year because I didn't get in. I didn't let that be the end. I
Mm.
took a year off. I worked full time at the same law firm and I studied my butt off. I researched more schools. I applied elsewhere. I didn't give up, right? And
Mm.
so in life, we're going to fail at things. And sometimes, like people who start their own firm are because they can't get a job and they feel like I'm a failure, I can't get a job. Just try new things. And sometimes, yeah, maybe you're not meant to go through that path, but don't take the first no as an answer,
Mm.
right? Always try again, be resilient because you never know what other opportunities are there. And trust me, if you succeed after failing, it's even sweeter. That's one advice I'd like to give is rejection sometimes is a good thing because it makes you stronger. It just makes you more persevering.
Mm. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this show. I hope that you found the episode helpful. And if you like the show, please subscribe and don't forget to rate and review. I'd also love to connect on Instagram. Send me a DM. I'm at Lupe Prado Coaching. I'll talk to you soon.